we gather in search of the truth, dark and mystery. It's the Drunk Turkey Show.
Big development today in the investigation into the murders of 4 University of Idaho students. According to state and local officials and court documents, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger has been arrested. He was arrested and arraigned this morning in Pennsylvania.
We have new details on what Brian Kohberger was doing right before his arrest. Police says a tactical team burst in to arrest the Idaho murder suspect. He was in pajamas and latest gloves, stuffing trash into Ziploc bags.
Hey, greetings from the year 3000. It still sucks. This is Philip J. Pride, and you're listening to the Drunken Turkey Show. Your one stop for this sort of thing. Hit that button, like and subscribe. You know what to do, just like every other podcast.
You guys know what to do, just like every other podcast. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the DT Show. I'm Daniel, and we got some new information coming out in the Jack and Lilly Sullivan disappearance. There is a new document that's been dropped. Apparently, from what I understand from a few headlines, was that restrictions were lifted on the previously dropped documents. And so we're going to break down what it is that these documents are saying and what it means. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell, guys. You guys know what to do. Also, by the way, there's going to be 2 live streams going on. If you're watching this and you're saying, hey, I see a different layout than I'm used to. This looks more like for a cell phone, you know, looking up and down. And you want to be on the more traditional, wider layout. We have two streams. YouTube's doing this thing now where it allows us to stream dual streams. One's going to have a layout for, you know, a portrait layout, and one's going to have a landscape layout. So I'll remind you guys here in a little bit as more people start to come on into the show. And so without further ado, let's look into what was brought up. Now, I haven't read this document yet. You know, one way like I always say, if it's highlighted together, then I went through it. I haven't read it. And so I wanted to get a live reaction with you guys. I thought that the title said something about, you know, unredacted information. Well, that's what I found earlier. So that's why I titled, you know, the title of the show today, Unredacted Information. So we're going to find out what it is. But before we start, I want to preference this with, whenever I look at information, you know, I like to ask a couple of questions about the information: who, what, when, where, and why. And when it comes to this scenario here, or with this information that's coming out, we have to look at this from the perspective of this is old news, because this is old news to law enforcement. This isn't new news to us. I mean, it's new news to us, but it's not new news to them. And so whatever we read in here and whatever we see, we have to come with the understanding that law enforcement obviously knew about this beforehand. This was part of their investigation that they released, where they disclosed that they don't have any criminal offense or any of those things, you know, grounds for criminal offense. And so we got to look at it from that perspective. Now, to us, this is new news. Now, we may look at this as something like, hey, this is huge. This is something police need to investigate it. Police already have investigated it, right? So just kind of want to preference it before we start, that's kind of where, you know, the perspective that I want to go through in reading this. So let's look at this. Court documents shed light onto the relationship of mother and stepfather of missing Nova Scotia children. Now, I told you guys about this. I told you guys that there was going to be some more redacted court filings coming out, that Malaya didn't want some of this information coming out, and some of the information that she didn't want coming out had to do with the relationship between her and Daniel Martel. I mean, either I know what I'm talking about, I'm talking to the right people, I got the right information, or if you guys still think I don't know what I'm talking about, I guess I must be psychic. You know, the psychic Daniel strikes again, telling you guys that there was going to be some court documents, what the arguments were about, what was, and I even told you guys what was redacted. I flat out told you guys it was the relationship between, some of the incidences that happened between Daniel and her, and that was what was redacted from there. So let's go through this. In newly released court documents, in the case of Jack and Lilly Sullivan, offer more details into the relationship between their mother and stepfather leading up to the children's disappearance more than 8 months ago. Lilly, 6, and Jack, 5, have been missing since May 2nd, 2025, when their mother, Malaya Brooks Murray, called 911 to report they had wandered away from their home in Lansdowne, Nova Scotia, a sparsely populated area about 140 kilometers northeast of Halifax. Their disappearance sparked an extensive search of the thick woods surrounding their rural home that turned up little evidence of part of a pink blanket and a child-sized boot print. It was actually a cluster of boot prints that were children's size. And I think it's important to understand that it was more than just a footprint. It was a cluster of prints. It was an investigation done into the prints. That investigation yielded financial records of the parents. From that financial records, they were able to track down a purchase. I believe it was at a Walmart. I think it was in March, so a couple of months before the disappearance, for a set of boots that were purchased for Lilly that matched the same print, size, and everything else that went along with that boot print. So I think it's more than just a child-sized boot print. I think you want to emphasize that there's some pretty strong evidence to indicate that that boot print probably belongs to Lilly. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, Daniel, there's a lot of people, kids were out there, yada, yada, yada. If you know who those kids are, I guarantee you, law enforcement knows who those kids are. And if law enforcement did an extensive investigation into the boot prints, I guarantee you they went out there and asked the people that they know that had kids out there in the area, hey, did you guys go on this portion of the pipeline? Do your kids wear this size of boots? Can we see your kids' boots? It's not hard to deduce those people from being a possibility. And if law enforcement went to such great lengths to figure out whether or not these boots belong to Lilly, I'm fairly positive they went, there was other avenues of investigation that they went through. The only part of the investigation that they're going to disclose to us is any part that's pertinent. And so the fact that Mr. or Miss Jones down the street that had a child who is 12 years old that may have been on the pipeline, who wore a size, I don't know, 8 men's, that's not going to come out in the documents that, oh, we asked this person over here who had a child. It just so happened that their child was too big and their feet were too big too for it to be the boot print. Because if they had to do that, then the documents that they would have released would have been the size of probably an encyclopedia, right? So the only thing that's going to come out is pertinent information that matters. All right, let's carry on. Let's see. Over the past 8 months, authorities have brought in cadaver dogs, conducted 75 interviews and several polygraph examinations, reviewed 1,066 tips and 8,000 video files, and have assigned RCMP units from multiple provinces to investigate the case. At the time of the disappearance, the children were living with Brooks Murray, their stepfather, Daniel Martell, and the couple's baby daughter. The family, including Jack and Lilly, were last seen in the public on the day before the 2 children were reported missing. They weren't, I guess they were seen, but they were also on video. As part of the case, police sought out 12 search warrants between May 16th and July 16th, 2025. And that's huge. They took out 12 search warrants. That's a lot. I mean, and that's one thing that I one of the reasons why I don't believe that, like, for instance, Daniel or Malaya had something nefariously done to the kids is because of the investigation, the amount of, information that law enforcement had access to that was provided first and foremost by their suspects. And these were suspects. You do not get 12 search warrants on people if you do not consider them your suspect. Now, them being a suspect at one time, them being investigated at one time, them being prime suspects is one thing. We also have to acknowledge the result of that investigation. And that result was that they found no evidence of criminal offense occurring. Now, one of the things that I've been telling folks, and I think there's a huge disconnect, because I personally don't think that Daniel or Malaya did anything nefarious to the kids. I have continually said If you want to argue that, the parents were neglectful or that they should have been watching them, that it was their responsibility when they walked out of the back door and walked off the property, I'm not going to argue against that. I more agree. And when it comes to certain things, and I've said this multiple times, I more agree with those who are disagreeing with me than they think. I just don't agree with the big one, right? I don't think Daniel had something to do with, or Malaya, that they purposefully did something to their kids. I don't think that the kids got into something and an accident occurred and they're trying to cover it up. I think that there's a good possibility that maybe they were being neglectful and the kids walked out of the back of the house and wandered off. My thought still does not remove complete culpability out of the parents. It's just that because I'm not castrating them and saying a bunch of negative things about them, a lot of people are confusing that train of thought with me saying that they're completely innocent of everything. I've never said that. I have continually said, I don't think that they have done something nefarious. I think the kids wandered off. And if you want to argue that there was some neglect behind that, I'm not going to disagree with you. I wasn't there. I have no idea. But I don't think that they went and purposefully did something. I don't think that Malaya had somebody kidnap the kids and they're on the reservation or they're on some other, random story that keeps coming up. I don't believe that. Not for a second. I don't really even believe that there's a possibility of a stranger abduction here because of where the boot print is. Boot print's in the middle of nowhere. Now, unless they came across the wrong pipeline worker, if there was somebody that was out there that was working that day and just so happened to be the wrong person to walk into or come across, then maybe you have a point. But I assure you that if there was some folks working on the pipeline that day, law enforcement's probably going to go and contact the pipeline and find out. Again, if you have some random guy out there, come across some kids that wandered off, this is not a crime of premeditation. This is not a crime where somebody is, planning it. This is more of a crime of opportunity if something like that were to happen. Nobody planned. How would they have known that the kids would have wandered off, right? So in those scenarios, things, there's a lack of, without, pre-planning. And even when you do, it's hard to get away with things. I mean, just look at what happened with the Tepe case out in Columbus. You had a doctor, very smart, intelligent person. I guarantee you he's more intelligent than Daniel and Malaya. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way at all. But this guy was a vascular surgeon and he did not cooperate with law enforcement. He was not cooperating one bit. They did an investigation against him, left his phone on a cot so that way it appeared that he was at work, and then he drove 400 miles, committed a murder, drove 400 miles back to work, and then did a surgery later on that day. Now, as I looked at the evidence, I told everybody in that situation that case seemed the person that committed this crime seemed very calculated. They didn't drive up to the house. They drove and parked away, walked up to the house. And then they approached the house. They approached from the rear because there was cameras in the front. And there are cameras in the rear of the residents in the alleyway. And those cameras, when this person approached, ducked their head as they were approaching to the light or to the cameras. And after they passed the cameras, lifted their head up. And then there was the awkwardness between the way they were walking. And I think that there's a good possibility that this person was wearing something inside of their shoe to make them appear to be taller than what they were. Because when they passed by the rear of the vehicle, the trunk lid was about halfway up his thigh to his knee. This guy appeared to be like 6'5", 6'6", or maybe not that tall, maybe about 6'3", 6'4". The person they end up arresting is about 6'1". They do sell these things that you can put into your shoes that make you seem a little bit taller. And the way he was standing or stepping made it appear that he was walking funny. And so you also had the fact that the inside of the residence, nothing was ramshacked, nothing was went through. The bodies were found inside of the bedroom. So the perpetrator went into the house, went straight into the room and surprised them there. This person was not let into the house, was not let into any of those things. And I was able to deduce that information fairly quickly and able to, I don't want to say predict, but able to um, basically create a profile of who the suspect was based off the small amount of information that we had. It's very little. And I was very accurate about it, and I ended up getting a lot right. And so I know a lot of people disagree with me here, but there's a lot more evidence and a lot more information here. I am way more confident that I am correct in this case with Jack and Lily than I am in Brian Koberger in this case and some of the other cases where I was already proven to be correct. Some people can't handle it, and I understand it, but it is what it is. Let's see. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right, let's continue this. In the court documents, there are details of an interview conducted by police with Brooks Murray. She discussed her relationship with Martel, saying she moved in with him on his mother's property in Lansdowne and late at around August of 2023. All right. And so Brooks Murray was asked if Martel has ever been physically abusive. Malaya said he would try to block her, hold her down, and once pushed her, the document said. She said that he would also take her phone from her when she tried to call her mom, which would sometimes be physical and hurt. Now, this sounds very familiar. I mean, Taylor was saying something very similar. I told you guys about that. I explained that. I brought that to everybody's attention, that there was a girlfriend and that there was some issues that were going on. And there was, some of this. Again, guys, I told you guys, I agree with a lot of you guys that disagree with me. I agree with you a lot more than you think. I just don't agree with the big one, right? I don't think he nefariously did something. I think two things can be right at the same time. I think he can be a jerk, and I think he can be a possibly an abusive boyfriend and not be responsible for those kids, passing away, so to speak, to a certain extent. Again, if you want to argue that they were responsible for them, they should have been watching them. There's some neglect there because they should have woken up. They should have made sure that the door wasn't, secured so that they couldn't get out without their supervision. Can't argue against you and won't even try because I agree with you. I don't disagree with you on those things. I've been very open and candid about it. Let's see. Meanwhile, Martel told investigators that they'd recently been fighting about money. Otherwise, their relationship was good. They had their ups and downs like any other couple, the document said, recounting what Martel told police in an interview. He said they would yell at each other when they were fighting, but there was no physical violence in the relationship. Documents also suggest that Lily and Jack's biological father, Cody Sullivan, had not seen the children for a few years, but also was paying child support until he lost his job 9 months before their disappearance. RCMP Staff Sergeant Rob McCammon confirmed the nature of the relationship between Brooks Murray and Martel at the time of the disappearance as part of the investigation. RCMP Staff Sergeant confirmed the nature of the relationship between Brooks Murray and Martel at that time of the disappearance as part of the investigation. I'm not going to comment on anything being a factor, but I will say any situation like that would be considered and followed up by our people. Basically what I said in the beginning. So what this means is that we already looked into it. It would have been something we would have considered and followed up. She said these things to us. We looked into those accusations. That's what I said in the beginning when I said the who, what, when, and where. When is important when it comes to this. And the when aspect, DT, your wife rocks. Thank you. I appreciate that. When was important, and who has this information? RCMP has this information. They're the ones that redacted the information. They investigated this already. So this is really not going to lead to anything new, to be 110% honest with you. Just going to give us an insight of a very toxic relationship between Daniel and Malaya. And, there's a possibility there that the kids may have seen this type of behavior from Daniel, towards their mother and maybe walked away because, they didn't want to see that and they wandered off and got lost. I think there's a good possibility that could have happened. I'm not going to disregard that possibility. You know, given the time in the morning and them being asleep and things of that nature, I'm not necessarily saying that is something that they walked away from in the moment. I don't think that there was an argument or a fight, or maybe there was. Maybe that's why Malaya was calling her mom at 8:28 in the morning that morning, because they had an argument. I mean, is that possible? Is that why she could have been calling her mom? I mean, who knows? That's only a question that Malaya could answer. Daniel as well. But I'm assuming law enforcement, they had their phones and things of that nature. If they were up and moving around that morning, I'm sure they may have been able to detect some of those things. Especially if Daniel has his phone under his pillow. One of the things that I know about in the Brian Koberger case and the Idaho case is when they were looking into Jack Decor, one of the ex-boyfriends of one of the victims in that case, Steve, the victim's father, Kaylee's father, when I interviewed him and talked to him on multiple occasions, had informed me and told me that one of the things that they were able to do to figure out that Jack Decor was not responsible for it was that they looked at the motions on his phone, and that because he slept with the phone on his bed, they could actually tell if somebody was moving in the bed while the phone was on the bed. Pretty impressive stuff, to be honest with you. And so I'm assuming they would have something like that there, right? Now, if Daniel had his phone on his nightstand and it wasn't on his bed, okay, that'd be a different story. But Malaya apparently called her mom, so she had her phone on her. You know what I'm saying? So there should be some movement and some things that you can figure out and deduce if you're law enforcement looking into the case. You can look at the movement that morning of the phone. And and we learned, for instance, like in the Alex Murdaugh case. Now, I don't know if Canada has these capabilities like the FBI and or also, the United States. But in the United States, like in the Murdaugh case, Cellbrite came in, they looked at the phone. They were able to tell whether the phone was in landscape or in portrait mode, or if it was leaning over or facing up, or, so many things. And there's so much information that you can pull off of those phones. I'm assuming Canada has the same capabilities or very similar capabilities. They had his phone for an extended amount of time. I think he said it was almost 3 weeks because he said they had it for like a little bit over 2 weeks. And then when he went back and got it, there was missing something. I don't remember what it was. I think the battery or something, or the SIM card. It was missing the SIM card. And so they gave him the burner phone back, and it took him another week or so for him to get the phone back and the SIM card. So who knows how deep they went into that investigation? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not part of the investigation. I don't pretend to be part of the investigation. I'm a commentary. I comment on the information that's here, and I put it into perspective. I'm not one of these persons that is going to try to tell you that I'm going to solve the case and that I'm doing this for the kids, that I'm going to solve it. It's not who I am, and that's not who any of these other YouTubers are, to be honest with you. We are all just commenting on what the information that is there and giving our opinions. For those that don't like my opinion, you can leave. I don't understand why you subject yourself to the pain of listening to my opinion if it hurts your ego so much. I don't understand it. I don't know why my opinion hurts you to that point. Why does it hurt you? If my opinion makes you feel a certain way, let me know in the comment section why my opinion makes you feel bad about yourself or the situation or anything else. Why does it matter to you? All right, let's continue. When asked if any of the other children's family members were considered suspects in the case, McMahon said there are no suspects that he can identify at this time. I think law enforcement truly believe that the kids walked off as well. They used the term resolved in one of the other, pieces that came out, one of the other documents that came out. They used the term that they believe it's going to be resolved, not solved, resolved. And we looked up the difference between the two. and they may come up with something like, we found him. We may not know the entire answer of everything that occurred, but we kind of know the roundabout of what happened. And that's what's being resolved. And I think that they're eventually going to find some information, maybe even some remains or some evidence that's out there once the spring comes around. That's going to point to where, what really happened. They may not get all the answers and, how they walked out, at exactly what time they walked out, which direction they went completely. I'm sure they're going to have an idea. But, I think that a lot of those answers aren't going to be answered. And we had a searcher from Please Bring Me Home, Jonathan, on the other night. If you haven't seen it, recommend going and watching it. He talked about how dense the woods were. He talked about how there was like trees that had fallen over, and because of that, where the trees were, there was like these deep holes into the ground where smaller animals or little kids could fall into, and that a lot of those tree trunks had hollowed out, and that animals and kids can get into those tree trunks. I mean, it was a pretty eye-opening, to hear and listen to about how dense the forest was, and the possibilities of the kids still even being there where, law enforcement or RCMP and ground and search team may have searched. So go check that out. Also, if you're watching this and you're looking at the format, it's not something you're not used to. We have two different lives going on. We have one where it's a portrait mode, and then we have one that's the normal mode. It's going on. YouTube's allowing us to do it in two different ways. And so if you're watching this on portrait mode and you want to watch it on landscape, just hit the channel button, like to go to the channel, hit lives, and then it'll show both lives going on. You're going to want to hit the one that doesn't have the cell phone little image in the comment section or in the description. Also, hit the like button and subscribe, guys. We're getting close to 54,000 subscribers. I want to hit 55,000 by the end of February. I think we can do it. I think we can get to 55 by the end of February. We can do it with your help and support if you guys can hit the like and subscribe button. Goes on to say, I wouldn't say anybody's a suspect. Again, we continue to gather information, whatever evidence that we're able to find, and we'll make a decision based on that, said McCammon, the officer in charge of major crime and behavioral sciences. The disappearance is still being investigated under the Missing Persons Act and has not moved to a criminal investigation, according to the RCMP. The mysterious nature of Jack and Lily's disappearance and lack of answers in this case has fueled widespread speculation online amid international media attention. I don't think that's the case. I think it's a misunderstanding of the answers that have been given. I have not I've only been covering true crime for a while, but I haven't seen, this amount of information being released, especially about somebody that they suspect. I mean, like, again, just talking about the Tepe case, they arrested Michael McKee. His probable cause affidavit was literally like 2 paragraphs, and that's it. We don't know much. Now, in my opinion, there's a lot in those 2 paragraphs I was able to deduce about, a ton of the information that they had on him, that we're going to find out. But in this case, they have released a tremendous amount of information about the investigation, the steps that they took into the investigation. Like I just talked a minute ago about the investigation into the boot print. They did financial investigation. They did GPS investigation into the parents. They looked at their financial records. They looked at their phone. They looked at their text messages, forensically looked at their phone. They did a lot. They did quite a bit. And they put that information out there saying, here, this is what we did. This is why we were doing it. We were doing this to determine whether or not a criminal act occurred. It's literally what it says in the documents. It literally says, this is our investigation, and we're doing this to determine if there was a criminal offense occurred. And then at the end of it, it tells you what the result was. And the result is that given the investigation and everything that they've done at that time, or at this time, there's no evidence of anything. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, that means at this time, that doesn't mean that, something can come up. And you're absolutely right. Something can come up. My thing is outside of like, Daniel breaking down and making a confession or something like that, and then that leads to actually something concrete, what else are law enforcement waiting on? It's not like they're waiting on them to do a lie detector test. It's not like they're waiting on on forensics to come back on their phones, or they're not waiting on video surveillance to come back, or they're not waiting on a number of things, their GPS locations. They're not waiting on any of those things. Those things have already been exhausted. They've been done. The investigation has been done into them. And the result is what the result is. To me, it's not necessarily a lack of answers. It's a lack of acceptance. It's a lack of wanting to accept what the investigation resulted in. That's just my opinion. I hope it don't hurt your feelings, but if it does, I don't care. In the submissions filed recently with the court as part of the CBC's application to access records, the Crown noted that although there is currently no reasonable grounds to believe a crime has taken place, as the investigation persists, it could become a criminal, and persons of interest in the disappearance might be identified. Let's see, who said that? In submissions filed recently with the court, blah, blah, blah. The Crown noted that although, who's the Crown? I don't know what that means. The Crown noted. Let me know in the comment section. I'm not familiar with what that is. That like some position in Canada's RCMP or something? The Crown noted. I don't understand what that is. Let me know what the Crown means. The submissions also include an affidavit filed by the RCMP noting police are leveraging technology-based investigative techniques which may provide information to support criminality and uncover the whereabouts of the missing children. McCannon said those techniques include the use of sophisticated drones and video review programs, which again, all this has been concluded. Michael Artenfield, a former police detective and professor at Western University in London, said that the Crown is choosing its words carefully in its submissions. Oh, the Crown is a prosecutor? Gotcha. When they state that there's no reasonable grounds for a criminal offense, what that really means to me is that there is currently not enough evidence to make an arrest for a crime, but a crime is not obviously being ruled out. I don't know. I mean, I would say yes in most cases. The only thing about this case that makes me hesitant on saying he's absolutely right is the fact that our CMP laid out their investigation. They laid it out, and that thing is riddled with reasonable doubt, first and foremost, across the board. I know that a lot of people say, well, RCMP can lie. They can tell the media some things. Yeah, they can, but this was a document that was a subject from court documents. You know what I'm saying? The media filed, this court document stating that they want the information about the case. RCMP complied. They can't put out false narratives out there. They can't lie on those things. Now, if this was just Daniel coming out, right? If all we heard was Daniel or Malaya saying, RCMP is not looking at us, we're not a suspect, there's no criminal offense, we passed our lie detector test, we've complied, we've done all this, and then if RCMP is turning around and saying, at this point we're just going to keep our mouth shut or whatever the case may be, I would say that that's a tactic. That's a tactic to try to make Malaya and Daniel comfortable. Now, if they came out to the public and said that, hey, we don't believe there's a criminal offense, could that be a tactic as well? And I think yes, to a certain point. I think that is a tactic that works in a short term. You don't want to make that a long-term tactic. Why? Because you're going to give people the false sense of safety around these folks. And if they did commit some sort of horrible crime, you put some other people in danger, right? And so I think in a short term type of situation, I think that that's possible. 8 months? No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the case here. I think at the end of the day, there's no evidence because obviously I think there's pretty strong evidence to indicate that the kids wandered off. But we'll see. Let's see. Arnfield said he's surprised the investigation has not turned criminal. Well, I mean, what do you have to turn it criminal? You know, I'll wait, but what do you have? You know, you, and I'm assuming that the results based off of the RCMP, they've done their investigation into them. Just because it wasn't a criminal investigation doesn't mean that they didn't treat them or treat it as a criminal investigation. Meaning you don't go and get out the warrants, the 12 warrants that they talked about, if it's not a criminal investigation. You don't take away their phones. You don't make them take polygraph tests. You don't interrogate them 4 times. You don't go through their financial records. And so what do you have when you have all that and that equals nothing? What do you have so that it would turn into a criminal investigation? I get it from the outside looking in, you know, it sounds one way, but when you start to break down the scenarios that need to happen for it to be that, it really just, it doesn't really hold a lot of water. In his experience, missing persons cases are generally seem suspicious if they're not found after about a week. Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, if you're looking at every situation, like it should be like every other situation, right? Like, oh, this person's not found in a week, automatic murder, whatever. That's not how things go. That's why when I look at certain cases, I don't attribute one to the other. So that when we were looking at Melody Buzzard's disappearance, you know, I told people, like, you cannot look at this and say, all right, if Melody Buzzard is guilty, or if Ashley Buzzard is guilty, Daniel's guilty, the Proudfoots are guilty, and all these other people. It's separate cases, separate situations, separate everything. Now, are you going to find similarities? Are you going to find, are there certain things that you look for? Yes, 100%. But the fact that they weren't found within a week and how dense that forest is and how long there's a good chance that they were missing for. And the biggest clues more than anything else is the footprints. The footprints shows that they walked a certain distance away. So that says that they were capable of walking a long distance. They were following a clear path. They weren't walking through the density of the forest. And so if they were to continue that motion together, they could have gotten significantly further. And so just kind of my thoughts there. So it goes on to say investigators are still investigators are still sort of pussyfooting around whether or not foul play is involved and whether there should be a strictly criminal investigation. I don't think they are. In fact, I think the investigator said there are no suspects. There is no criminal offense. I don't think that they're playing around trying to figure out whether or not it's foul play or not. Again, what evidence do you have of that? And it's, you know, you can look at other cases and see, especially with the amount of cooperation that is being done here. You know, I know that, for instance, Michelle After Dark, she actually had a video not too long ago, and I had brought up the Haro case and I brought up some other cases, and she was like, oh, you know, well, there was this other case where something had occurred and they made an arrest on the parents like 5-6 months later. So I wasn't supposed to be cherry picking or whatever. And my thoughts were, in that case, was the mother and the father as cooperative in this situation? Did they have the evidence that was portrayed over? And the other thing is too, timing. Like one of the things that I see quite often is people tell me, oh, Ted Bundy passed the lie detector test. And some other guy, I think from the 70s, passed the lie detector test. And I'm like, you know that the 80s and the 70s were like 40 and 50, 60 years ago? You don't think technology has changed and things have gotten harder to fake? You know, and it's not just Daniel passing a lie detector test, it's Daniel and Malaya. And so unless both of them are a tag team duo of narcissistic serial type killers that can pass these things, because you're then comparing Daniel Martel to Ted Bundy, a narcissistic serial killer. So are you saying that that's who Daniel and Malaya are? And if so, then I mean, then what are your thoughts? Is that they committed the ultimate crime against their kids and somehow have been super cooperative and managed to outsmart law enforcement, something that even Brian Koberger, a PhD student in criminal justice, or this recent guy, Michael McKee, a vascular surgeon. Um, Daniel, a lot of people believe you're the next Albert Einstein, I would guess. Let's see. I don't have all the facts, but I will say it's a novel of items of these type of investigations, particularly dealing with two children. McMahon once said investigators have gathered all the necessary information, will make the decision on criminality that may be relevant to the case. And so that's the end of that article there. So in the end, what does it say? To me, it says that Daniel is what I thought, and I think a lot of other people thought, not the best boyfriend in the world, perhaps a little bit abusive. I don't want to say a little bit abusive. It's one person's word versus another. I've not spoken to Malaya, but this doesn't sound different than what Taylor said. Taylor kind of said that he took her phone and did those things too. I would say that is a little bit abusive. I wouldn't say that's like, this is more on the like in the emotional side and a little bit physical, I would say too, based on what it sounds like. Again, I wasn't there, so I don't know, but it does kind of seem that way. That wasn't something that like I said, two things can be right at the same time. And I agree with a lot more folks that disagree with me than they think. I just don't agree with the big thing, right? I don't think that Daniel or Malaya off their kids. I don't think that they had them kidnapped. I don't think that they're on a reservation somewhere. I don't think that they're, Malaya's family picked them up and have them somewhere. I don't believe in any of that. I think that those are all wild conspiracies that don't make any sense. Based on the footprints and some of the information, the evidence that's out there, based on, looking at where, because I was looking at the flight pattern, MV. I got to get back to you. I know you sent it. I've been traveling here recently, so I just got back. But we're looking at the flight pattern of the helicopter of the disappearance. It really wasn't anywhere near the boot print. It was more around the area of the home. Also the drones, everything else. Nothing was where the boot print was. And I believe that those kids could have gotten out to the boot print by the time that search started. They could have made that boot print by the time the search started. That's what I'm trying to say. And so I think they could have gotten a lot further away. There was a kid here recently, 4 years old, Jonathan Boylan, maybe something like that. He ended up walking away with his dog. I think he got about 2 miles, and they ended up finding him deceased in a body of water. And they found him only because his dog was alive, and his dog heard the searchers and brought him to. But that little kid walked away 2 miles. Jack and Lilly, they're together. And when you have two kids together, they'll walk further away than one kid by themselves, even with the dog. And again, we have that situation here recently with a 2-year-old that went 7 miles. So I definitely think they probably got significantly further than the search area, and I think it's just a matter of time before they find some sort of evidence of it. All righty, guys. American justice, get the hell out of here. You know why? You can get out of here. I don't know if you're telling me to get out of here, but you can. Let's see, John Bailey. Yes, there you go. John Bailey, 100%. All righty, guys. So that's I'll do a couple of questions here. Put a couple of stars. I know you're talking to me. Oh, hey, what's going on, Dr. Bona? Good to see you. Good to see you. Put a couple stars so I know that you're talking to me and not to each other. And let's, if you have any questions or comments, let me know. Hit the like button, guys. Hit the subscribe button. Ring that notification bell. You guys know what to do. Oh, the government. Crown is prosecuted. Yeah, I wasn't sure about that. I was like, I have no idea. I've never heard that before. But we'll see. We'll see. Oh, American Justice, get out of here. I thought you were talking to me. I was like, what? Yeah, let's not dox anybody, guys. You know, YouTube's doing this weird thing. They've took down a couple of my videos actually on the Timothy Dees case. They took down all my videos on the Timothy Dees case, which I plan on doing a video here pretty soon, kind of re-putting everything up. But they said that I violated some sort of what was it, privacy thing, putting somebody's information out there. So you know, you see somebody doxing people, putting their information out there. If you report it, you hit the report button and put harassing or whatever it was, or putting out personal information, YouTube will literally take it down. And that entire playlist, it took down my entire Timothy Dees playlist. And so, yeah, if you see some stuff like that, report it, guys. Report it. 100%. Just start flagging it. Start reporting things like that. You know, the doxing, the anything that you think is just like seriously out of line, report it. I guarantee you, YouTube, once they get enough of those reportings and they start looking at it, they'll drop them right away. You know, with the whole Timothy Dees thing, I actually thought it was law enforcement at first. I thought it was the officers that I suspect might have not necessarily something to do with Timothy Dees' death, but have a reason why not to investigate his death. And I thought it had something to do with them because I had never had anything taken down before. And then I started getting some messages from other creators who I'm close with who had the same thing happen to them on that case. And then I noticed with I want to say it was Truth and Transparency. She had put out a video somewhere. She had posted it on her community page. And so and I saw her community page and on my feed saying, YouTube, why did you take this down for privacy thing? And then that's when I realized that YouTube's doing it across the board. I was like, oh, snap. So it wasn't just me. It wasn't just the Timothy Dees case because the other creators who had contacted me were covering the Timothy Dees case and their stuff had gotten taken down. So I thought it was specifically for that. But Lena obviously wasn't talking about Timothy Dees, and her, I don't even know who it was, but one of her videos and one of the things that she was covering got taken down because of it. And I was like, wow, so it is YouTube. I actually sent a screenshot to Barbara Hall and said, who's Timothy Dees' mom? I was like, hey, Barb, look, I guess it's not law enforcement that's doing it. I think it's actually YouTube cracking down on some of the true crime communities who have gone a little too far. And I think that it's probably a good thing, you know, to be honest with you. I think that, and I've talked to Steve about this, Gonsalves. This is the father of Kaylee Gonsalves. And I've also talked to some other folks about this because they were at some point going to sue a couple of the creators who were attacking them. And I was like, man, you know what? Maybe somebody needs to go after YouTube. You know, YouTube's allowing that on their platform. They're allowing the hate. They're allowing the spewing and the negative comments and the negative talk and misinformation and all that other stuff. Maybe somebody needs to sue them and maybe make a you know, some noise about it. And you know, in this case here, I've actually talked to a few people who've talked to some lawyers about suing some creators already. And so we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. That's them. That's not me. I ain't suing anybody. But you know, I think they're going to probably take it to YouTube. And if YouTube, you know, like I said, I think they have some culpability here for the stuff that they're allowing on their platform. Just me. But let me see, guys. Yeah, it was nuts. It was crazy. It was crazy that YouTube they took down everything, like my entire Timothy Dees file. And I was like, shoot. Like I went like into detail about things in the Brian Koberger case and nothing ever got taken down there. And so that's why I thought honestly that it was like it was the Fredericksburg, Missouri Police Department that did it. I honestly thought it was them. Me and Barbara were talking about it, and then it started happening to other creators that were covering that specific case, and then it started happening to other ones. So if you see some things like that, some people, doxing other people and things like that, or talking negatively about other folks or putting out their information, especially like, some of these folks who have been cleared. Yeah, hit the report button. Let's get them out of here. I hope they search further west on the pipeline, the pipeline west. Yeah, I agree with you here. Yes, that case needed the attention of the world. I agree. Is there a perception, right or wrong, that Canadian LE is not as forthcoming as US LE investigating procedures, or maybe the other way around? I don't know, but I do know in this case specifically, RCMP was very forthcoming. I mean, they're the ones that have redacted these. These are their documents. These are their documents that they've redacted and unredacted, put out the information about the investigation. I personally have never seen a case put out as much information. Oh, let me put it this way. I've never seen a case that has turned criminal where this much information has been put out before, while they suspected it of being a criminal investigation. The fact that they went to this extent, like, see, all RCMP had to do, really, if they wanted to, in my opinion, to keep this from going out to the public, the information, is turn it into a criminal investigation. If it was a criminal investigation, then the media would have had no leg to stand on to get any information about the investigation. But through that, even with that there, they still kept it as a missing persons. And this is why they were able to get this information out. As far as forthcoming, I think I'm not familiar with, RCMP in Canada and stuff. From what I understand is that nothing usually comes out and that they're very strict, which should tell you something about all the stuff that's come out in this case. That should speak volumes to people about what RCMP think, RCMP are, and where they're at. Now, if you think that that's wrong, don't come at me and yell at me. Call up RCMP and say, hey, I think you're wrong. Turn it into a criminal investigation. Here's my case. I think Daniel and Malaya did it because of this. And who knows, maybe you'll convince them. Maybe something they don't, and they just need your help. And I hope if you truly have the answer, not being sarcastic, I would like you to go forth and for real, tell them. Because if you truly have the answer that could solve the case, we need you. It's your time. It's your moment. I think Eminem said it right. Don't, you only get one chance and one opportunity. Don't blow it. Don't put any spaghetti on your sweater already. Go do it. You got it. I have faith in you. Let's see. Yeah, RCMP doesn't say anything. RCMP doesn't say anything. Yeah, no sarcasm. If you truly know something, let them know. I mean, I tend to believe the RCMP know more than me or any other YouTube creator that's out there or anybody that's investigating this in their home. I think they have more answers. I think they have more. I think they have more to their, they got more available to them. They have access to certain people and information. So I tend to believe what they put out there in this scenario because they put it out there pretty deep. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's pretty extensive what they put out. And so, in the end, I like I said, if you think you've known something now, there's a possibility you could, you may be from the area and you may know somebody who knows somebody who said something, and that needs to be figured out. Now, I don't think you're going to find out something from listening to me or some other YouTuber. I don't think you're going to find some answers that we're going to have unless we were the like Ryan from Ryan Finds Truth. Right now, he and he and his wife, they go out there and they do searches. They actually found somebody who was missing. They found their remains. They got answers for a family that was grieving and looking for somebody for some time now. That's the type of YouTuber that's going to go find some answers. If they're going to find something, they're going to go out there. But if you're just sitting, in your room after a late shift like me, well, what the hell am I going to solve? The only thing I can do is give you guys my opinion and commentary on the evidence and the information that's there. I don't have any secret information outside of I talked to Daniel and Janie still. Outside of that, what I don't have the evidence. I don't have any of those things, and I never claimed to, and I never said I was going to solve this case. Now, I do think that it's pretty obvious the kids wandered off, and I think RCMP know that. If they found, for instance, remains out there, or they found evidence that the kids wandered off, I'm not going to come out here and say, oh man, I solved the case. It was me. I figured it out. No, RCMP did. The ground and search and rescue team went out there and found them. I followed the evidence, and I said that they walked out there, but I guarantee you RCMP ground search and rescue team already knew that well before I did. They probably had that information and knew about that before I even started talking about this case. Because I got into this case about 5 months in, remember? I was a little bit late. All right. Let's see. Yeah, RCMP don't say anything. I don't think this case will be solved unless they find him. I agree to that. They're going to have to find something, whether it's remains or if it's, clothing or something, because we also have to add in the animal component to this, where if these kids succumb to the elements out there and passed away, there's going to be scavenger animals that are going to go and move things around, and things can be moved around quite a bit of a ways away. And so maybe not like a super far distance, but there's going to be that aspect to it. So it's just unfortunate. But let's see. Respectfully disagree, Wendy James. I don't think that. So Sirius says, I don't think that Daniel or Janie have any idea what happened. I don't think they know anything for certain. I think that they've, with me talking to them and kind of explaining things, because I've had to, because they've also had it in their mind a few things, right? Like, for instance, the fact that Malaya wasn't yelling for the kids. So to Janie, this is what Janie saw. Janie woke up because she heard Daniel yelling for the kids, the dog barking. She walked outside, and when she walked outside, she saw Malaya with Meadow on her hip, just standing there, not looking, not yelling, not calling out. And she asked, "What are you doing? What's happening?" And she said, "The kids wandered off." She goes, she said first that Malaya seemed surprised that she was there, and then said that the kids had wandered off. At the time, it didn't register because the kids wandered off. She went in, she got dressed, she went out there to go try to find them. But later on, what made it suspicious was the fact that she wasn't yelling for them, because she'd asked them how long they'd been gone, I think, and she said like 15, 20 minutes. And she's like, why wasn't she yelling for them? And then she leaves right away, right? The next day. And so they had it in their mind that, she left, she did something to have somebody pick up the kids or whatever the case may be. Not necessarily something nefarious, that she didn't have something wrong with the kids, that maybe she, had them on the reservation or had them on these other places. And I had to explain to them, like, look, this is what information that law enforcement should have. These theories, if we play out those scenarios, they really don't make any sense. And I explained it to them over and over again. And they started to kind of come around to understanding certain things. What I was saying is to be somewhat, more than likely true. And so Now, do I think that they wandered off? Probably. Do they know that for a fact? No, just like I guess nobody does. I suspect that, given the boot print and everything else. When people say there's no evidence, they vanish without a trace. That's not true. There's a blanket, and then there's the boot print that's along the same path. You can get to the blanket. You can get to the boot print by passing by the blanket, and so you have two pieces of evidence out there. And then you have to factor in that the boot prints were outside of the search area. And if those boot prints and that those boot prints could have been left before the search started, right? So before the search started, the kids could have gotten already further than the searching perimeter. And so who knows how far they could have gotten from there. And I think it's just a matter of time. But did Daniel and Janie know exactly what happened? I don't think so. Let's see. How can you not? Kids don't just vanish. See, that's the thing. That's just exactly what I was saying. Kids don't just vanish. There was a blanket. There was a boot print. The boot print investigation determined that it was the same size and boots and same tread pattern of the boots that were purchased for Lilly just a couple of weeks before. I mean, it's not vanished without a trace. I can't stand when people say that because it's not true. It ain't true at all. Vanished without a trace would be no blanket, no boot prints, nothing. And that's not the case. That's just not the case here. It's not. All righty, guys. Somebody says, I believe no one put them to bed Thursday night. Well, what makes you believe that, Susan? What makes you believe that no one put them to bed? What gives you the thought that nobody put them to bed? What's the evidence behind that? Like, is there a phone call and you could hear them talking at 4 a.m? Is there video of their lights being put on? Is there video of movement or any of these things that happen to do with Daniel's vehicle, his phone, surveillance cameras that are in the area? Because there are some. There may not be one that's pointing on his house, but on either side of his house, not too far away, there are cameras. I mean, but you can believe it. That can be your belief. Ain't nothing wrong with that. I just don't see any evidence to that. Any evidence at all. And if you're going to be making fun of my mods, you're going to get blocked too. That's not what the documents say, though, Susan. That's not at all what the documents say. The documents say that she saw Lilly pop her head in and out. And I got to go back to her interview that she said, but like, you guys hang on every little word that somebody says, looking for something. Like, I guarantee, you know what, Susan, I'm going to put in I got an idea. Here is, I just put in, Susan, I would like you to join me. I put in the link. Let's come on up. I want to ask you a few questions. And then I'm going to ask you those same questions again about some things that you answered before. And let's see how accurate, under pressure of having this video probably get about 4,000 to 6,000, 8,000 views. About 400 people in here and combined with both live streams. Let's see how well you can answer some simple questions. And then ask you again and how well you answer those simple questions with just the pressure of being on screen with me. I want your camera on, because let's make it as much pressure as possible or anxiety, and as stressful as possible as when you have, for instance, your kid's missing and you can't find them. Because I'm pretty sure your mind's not going to be in the right place to remember things exactly or say things exactly accurately. People misspeak. People say things that they don't mean, not necessarily out of trying to be nefarious or any of those type of things. And people sometimes are wrong. Nobody's perfect. But if you think you are, please join me, Susan. I put the link in the description. I would love to have you come up here. Well, I'll ask you some simple questions, first grade questions, stuff that anybody should be able to know the answers to. And I would like you to see I would like you to see how much pressure this is. Where is it that DM was supposedly driving that night? Who said he was driving anywhere that night? Because Wong and Justin Smith said that they heard or saw somebody. RCMP refuted that. They said there was zero evidence of that. See, this is one of the things that I'm talking about. RCMP refuted the information. Now, again, you got to ask yourself, if RCMP thought that they had a suspect here and they had somebody come out and say that they thought they saw their vehicle driving around, why do you think RCMP, from one day to the next that information comes out to the media, is immediately emailing the media and saying that that's not true? And that although that the information was said that they had no evidence of it, if they had no evidence of it, if it was a possibility, why would they even come out and say anything? Why would they even say anything? There would be no point to it. No point. 0 point in doing that. And so to come up here and say, oh, Daniel, where were you driving that night? It's like, come on now. That was already refuted by law enforcement. If you want to be this person that believes in conspiracy, we used to call them the pro burgers, when we talked about Idaho. These were the folks that thought that the killer in that case jumped from an airplane, parachuted onto the 3rd floor, and then entered the building. If couldn't believe what law enforcement was putting out because it hurt their ego or their opinion. If you want to be a conspiracy theorist or a crazy person like that, go ahead, but just don't bring it here. Don't bring it here. But you see, Travis says, I heard Daniel's vehicle that night. Couldn't see him, but I know the sound. He also said that he had seen the lights traveling through the trees. And that's what law enforcement were able to determine, in my opinion, why it was not there and why that was not true. I'm not saying that Wong and Smith are lying. I'm saying that they're just wrong. Now, could they be lying? Very much so. Could they be inaccurate? Very much so. I mean, maybe they saw a vehicle traveling through the lights and stuff. Maybe it was Tuesday night or Thursday or Monday night, and they just got the date confused. It's not like law enforcement came knocking on their door the very next day after the disappearance, and they said their story right then and there. They said it, 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later for Justin, something like that. So completely different scenarios there, but they said that they saw the lights going through the trees. Now, if you have a camera, it may not face Daniel's house. You may not be able to see the cars going and coming from the house, but you may be able to see the lights through the trees, as Mr. Wong stated he saw. And if those lights in the trees aren't there, ooh, what does that mean? But you're willing to believe that after law enforcement have flat out said that it was not true. You see where the problem is here? That you want to believe that Daniel and Malaya did something, even though RCMP said that there's no evidence of it, and are willing to believe some other guy that's been arrested for a whole lot of other stuff. And you want to believe him, even after RCMP said that it's not true what he was saying. It's wild to me. I mean, that's just not taking in the information and sticking to your initial thought because you don't want to be wrong. You don't want your ego to be hurt. You're a detective of the year. You can't be wrong. You're the Sherlock Holmes of missing persons, and there's no way you're wrong. Law enforcement is wrong. The evidence is wrong because you can't possibly be wrong. I swear, some people, they think that I'm a narcissist. They're the ones that think that that my opinion is the difference between Daniel and Janie and Malaya getting arrested, and also think that they're the ones that know more than law enforcement. They're the real experts, and yet everybody else is the narcissist. Everyone else is the narcissist, not you, Mr. and Miss Know-It-All. No more than police, no more than law enforcement, no more than the evidence. You're not the narcissist. Everybody else is. With that, I'm going to leave you guys tonight. please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell. And as Axeman says, if you have information, call 1-800 or 1-888-803-RCMP, which is 7267. Tell them your theory. I'll see you next time. Peace out, guys.